A jury has just convicted Brian Walshe of murder in the first degree. With that, the judge thanked the jury for their service, saying it had been substantial. Brian Walshe now convicted of murdering and dismembering his wife, Anna, in 2023. This took the jury 5 hours and 45 minutes to decide. They got the case Friday afternoon, came back for just a couple of hours today, and there you have your verdict. I want to bring in attorney Elyse Hershon. We've been speaking with you, Elyse, throughout the duration of this trial. We weren't sure how long this was going to take. Are you surprised that this went pretty quickly?
Not surprised it went quickly. I think earlier this morning on a different segment had discussed that I was expecting, I'd be surprised if it went past tomorrow. On Friday, I think because it was the end of the day and they were just getting all the exhibits, it was unlikely that they were going to come back with a verdict. But certainly, even though they were not allowed to deliberate over the weekend, certainly they were not able to put it out of their mind. So that time also, I think, counts towards the deliberation count, even though it wasn't official in the jury deliberation room. I don't think this is a surprising verdict for many of us. I do have some thoughts on that as well.
Okay, so we'll talk about this because there's a lot to unpack here. They had 200 pieces of evidence that they needed to enter in, make sure they all saw, they were marked, they had to discuss, and then they had to debate whether Brian Walshe was guilty of murder in the first degree, the second degree, or not guilty. They polled the jury when they came back. Everyone came back saying this was, in fact, their verdict, murder in the first. Can you explain to our viewers what that means and the distinction between first and second degree?
Yes, second degree essentially does not have the element of malice aforethought, which is the premeditation piece. Usually a second degree is not the only charge. It's almost always on a verdict slip in Massachusetts with a first-degree murder charge. Usually if a jury comes back with a second, a lot of times it's a split the baby type of verdict, so it's a compromise. That's more often if there's a first degree and a manslaughter on the verdict slip, and there's some that think it's a manslaughter, some that think it's a first degree, and they settle on a second. So that's a lot of times when they come to what's called a compromise verdict. I think here it was going to be pretty clear either they thought that they killed her or they didn't, and if they did, it was going to be a first, which it is, that we now know. The polling of the jury is very common in any criminal jury trial in Massachusetts, particularly in a first degree. The defense asked for it. I'm sure the judge would have done it. And essentially what that means is they just want to make sure that there was no intimidating or sort of pressuring going on in the jury room. So essentially that all 12 of them agreed, and it wasn't one that wasn't sure. That's their opportunity to say, well, actually, I wasn't sure, but everyone sort of pushed me to do that. They all answered that they were sure, and that was their decision.
So let's talk about defense strategy here, because this trial really got off to a surprise start. They admitted to the two lesser charges, that he dismembered his wife and disposed of her body. Now that, obviously that wasn't a successful defense, what do you make of the strategy?
I think the two most surprising things in this trial, neither of them were the verdict, which I think did not surprise anybody, was the decision, and again, we don't know what the strategic decision was, for Brian Walshe to plead guilty to the misleading of the police and to improper disposal of the body, which does refer to dismemberment. Dismemberment itself is not a crime in and of itself. It's not named as a dismemberment crime, but that's what it referred to in this case. I didn't really see an advantage there to doing that from the start. I was reserving my opinion on that to see what transpired in the trial. The second surprising thing was the opening statement. The defense coming right out and saying, we're going to put on a defense of a sudden death, a sudden medical event.
There was no murder.
That there was no murder,
yeah.
And there was no killing, and there was no manslaughter. I think I've been involved and tried as co-counsel 17 murder trials in my career, one of them being a dismemberment trial. The facts were very different. It was a sibling dispute, and then one brother ended up killing the other and dismembering him. But it was very different because we went for a self-defense manslaughter defense, and our client testified, and we saved him from a life without parole conviction. There's a mandatory sentence of life without parole for first-degree murder. The sentencing has to happen, but it's a formality in terms of life without parole is mandatory for Brian Walshe, so he will not be seeing the light of day.
And we will hear that sentencing, what it will be exactly Wednesday, as well as victim impact statement.